attitudes. Sometimes I tell this joke to my intimate friends, and I'm going to assume everyone here is an intimate friend. And I tell them that if you stand in line in Brussels or New York or Amsterdam waiting to board a flight, and there happens to be somebody from any of the African countries standing in front of you, and they decide to pull out a stick of chewing gum, they unwrap it, they slip it into their mouth. What they do next is crumple the wrapper and stick it into their pocket or into their bag. Now 6.5 hours later, that same person lands in Wakanda Airport, right here, and they take out another piece of gum, and this time the wrapper finds itself on the floor at the airport. And we have to ask ourselves why. Because we do obviously know what to do, and that's why we did it in Brussels differently than we do it here. So my point is that it's not that we don't know what to do, it's that we have to decide that we will do it here in Wakanda. We will do here what we do elsewhere. There are so many people willing to perform all kinds of work when they travel out of our continent. So many men willing to share equally in housework with their spouses and in childcare with their spouses. And then when we get back home to Wakanda, things change. We have to change our mindsets, and we have to do it ourselves. And when we do, there's a bright future that awaits us. Let's not fool ourselves into thinking that the outside development partners will do it for us or lead us in doing it. Rather than wade into the fruitless debate of whether they are here to develop or rather underdevelop our continent, I prefer to ask an alternate question. Why should they do it for us? And particularly if we don't want to do it. Or if we don't show that we want to do it. Another way to ask the question is to say, why should they want our development more than we want it for ourselves? Framed that way, I'm inclined to share with you another story of what I typically tell my graduate students. I look each of them in the eye when I start working with them, and I tell them, there's one in this room right now, and I tell them, after we start working together, that the day that I find out that I am more interested in your work, your project, your thesis, your research than you are, that's the day I walk. That's the day I go and find someone else who's interested in my help, my support. Because if I think about it, there's nothing that I benefit from mentoring you in your thesis. All the benefit accrues to you. And so if you don't care about its quality, if you don't care about how much effort you put into it, if you don't care about finishing it on time, why should I, the one who gets no benefit from it, be the one who's nudging you or pushing you, coaxing you? Why should it? It sounds almost irrational to me. It actually sounds irrational to me. And so I tell them that. And for the same reason, I would say, why should we expect our development partners to come and do our development for us if we show that we aren't interested in it ourselves? Or if we show that we don't care about it that much? I don't expect them to do this for us. And if we continue to show little to no interest in our own progress, we should not be surprised if our development partners remain with us, but only to keep protective watch over the resources, what we call the development aid that they give us. Because you have to understand that development aid really comprises proceeds from their taxpayers back at home. And so yes, they will stay, but for that reason only. We would do the same if the roles were reversed. So the responsibility to develop our own land is no one else's but ours. And if we choose not to do it for ourselves, let's please think about our children and our grandchildren. In some countries across this continent today, we're losing a whole generation of middle-class children to the diaspora. The parents are paying hefty sums of money for them to go to private schools, even as early as elementary school. And then they go to private secondary schools, frequently boarding schools, for junior high and for senior high. And after paying so much money, whichever foreign currency you choose to denote it in, for their fees, for their children, it is clear that the parents see outside universities as the logical next destination for their children because of the investment they've made. Public universities at home don't seem to be the option after you've paid $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year for 17 or 16 years for a child to finish school. Certainly, that says something about our own people's estimation of our public education systems across the continent. But that's not where I want to go right now. Rather, today I want to tell you that those children who have gone outside are much more likely than our generation to want to come back home. And they want to come and have their children here. And those children of our children are our grandchildren. And so they will be right here. And the question for me, the question for all of us, is what are we leaving them? These children and grandchildren of ours, what are we leaving them as a continent? One cultural trait that I know we share with our colleagues from the West is the affinity to push our children to get further than we did in school, in the workplace, in life, in everything. We try to get our children to go further than we did. So that means we have to be concerned about the countries that we are leaving for our children. And I would further argue that this so-called cultural trait, the one of pushing our children to achieve more than we did, should transcend our homes and our biological children and come into our workplaces also. What I mean is that our work children, meaning that if you're a minister, an MP, a president, that refers to the community that you're a custodian of. And what I'm suggesting is that we should strive to get members of that community, our work children I call them, whichever community that is, to go further than we did. If we do that for our biological children, then that tells us that we know it is the best way to treat our children. And we should do that at work also. Why shouldn't we strive to ensure that our students and our staff become better than us? After all, are we not one family? Are we not one community? And which community will be more prosperous and have better schools and opportunities than the one where you are the best educated or wealthiest, or the one where you are the community median? And my point is that if we help people to get beyond us, it raises the average level of the community, and we all stand to benefit from it. In every office I have worked, I have endeavored to hire people who are smarter than me, or people who helped me get beyond where I could on my own. The magic result, interestingly, is that the organization that I then belonged to, the organization that at that point in time I happened to head, does much better than it would have if I had hired people who allowed me to be the smartest person in the organization. And guess who gets the credit? The leader of the organization. And if you happen to be in that fortunate position, all the credit accrues to you, typically. Yes, you, the leader. So it's a way in which we can sort of incline ourselves. It should come naturally to us if we consider the people we work with as family. After all, we are one family. Whether it's the family of Malawi, the family of Ghana, the family of Africa, whichever family you choose to, we are one family. And when I think about that green, red, black flag that Malawi flies under, and I ask myself, or could it be that people don't see it as one family? then we have a much more fundamental problem. So if we are one family, we should be thinking about our family today as we do at home. We should be thinking about our family in the future as we do at home. Frequently I tell my colleagues who may have different opinions on various things that as long as we're trying to reach the same goal, for instance, the upliftment of Ghana or Malawi, then our differences should only be in disagreements about whether getting to the goal is better achieved by driving through Area 11 or driving through Area 43. Whether it would be better to get there by taking the Area 11 bypass or going the direct route through Area 43, in a sense, also depends on whether it's rush hour at 5 p.m. or whether it's midnight. But that's all we should be disagreeing on, how we get to that ultimate place that we have a shared vision of getting to. And if both factions are reasonable, reasoning colleagues, then we should be able to vet the different proposals and come to the same conclusion about which way is the best way to get where we both or we all want to get. Of course, depending on whether it's 5 p.m. or midnight. So let's think about our country's future, and in so doing, think about our children's future and our grandchildren's future. If I were to be called from the earth today, I would go knowing deep in my heart that I've had a good life. I never won an Olympic medal, and that's why I kept going, trying to do better. But I would know that I've lived a good life. And the question that derives from that for me is whether we are comfortable with the life that we are leaving our children and our grandchildren. The continent that we are leaving them. Does it guarantee them a good life? It is that charge that makes me agree that we do have to create wealth.